everybody. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to Friday Night Church. It is so good to be with you. My name's Scott. I'm one of the pastors on staff, and we are just excited that you are here tonight. We got a great night planned. We're going to be wrapping up our summer-long series, Something More. We'll be looking at Jesus, talking with Peter and reinstating him. Great message that Pastor Brad will have for us. If you don't know, after service, we have a very special treat for you. It is a toothsome, sweet, delicious, bubbly, creamy treat that you don't want to miss out on. So don't leave early because you might not get that treat. If you want to reach into the chair in front of you and pull out the Connect card, you can begin filling that out if you would like. If you're a guest, we would love for you to fill that out and bring it out to Guest Central. If you've been here for a while and we've got your information, you don't need to fill it out. But if you have a prayer request, we would love to get that. Our pastoral staff sees all those requests every week, and we keep you in prayer all week long. We'll collect those before the message with the offering. I've got a couple announcements for us this weekend. The first is you've probably heard about it because we've been talking about it a lot. Rooted is coming again. We launched Rooted back in January, and over 200 people in our church went through this 10-week discipleship experience. It is awesome. Rooted is great. We went through it. We led a group, and you'll learn great things. It's all about discovering, learning more about God, learning about others, and really connecting with your purpose. And it's got great discipleship stuff. It's got great Bible study. But it's also got great relationships. And one of the best things for us is that we got involved in a group with other people kind of in our same stage of life, and we found friends, like actual friends. Now when I come to church, I know people, and it's great. I can talk to them, and I can ask them how their kids are. Their kids give me stickers of Captain America. Like, it is the best. I love it. So many great reasons to sign up for Rooted. And I know a lot of you think, oh yeah, that's great, I want to sign up. But it starts next week. I mean, Labor Day is on Monday, and so Rooted starts a week from Sunday. And you do not want to miss out on this life-changing experience. If you have more questions, you want to sign up, just go to Rooted Central in the courtyard after service, and we'll get you signed up there. Another announcement, as you leave this evening, you'll be given one of these sheets. We have a team, missions team, going to Kenya in October, and it's a great opportunity with Vicki Maynard, one of our former missionaries, former pastoral staff. She's been working over there with the Haven Recovery Center, and we have a group going there, and so we have some fundraising opportunities. You'll get one of these sheets, and on there's 4 different opportunities: Gandolfo's, Golden Spoon, Chick-fil-A, lots and lots of good stuff. And so grab one of these. They're perforated, so you can just rip off the one that you want. And if you go on this date and present this flyer, a portion of what you spend will go to support our mission team, which will be great. And last, you will also be given a new Bible reading guide. We've been in a great series, Something More, all summer long, looking at the book of John. But next week, we are starting a new series called The Space Between Us. It's kind of all about those gaps in our relationships with God, with others, and maybe some intentional steps we can take to fill in those gaps to have more healthier relationships, more authentic relationships. And so we're really excited about that. If you need anything else, just go to findme.com/thisweek. All that information is there for you. Now, why don't you please stand up as we sing some great songs to our great God.
I'm excited to be here tonight, to be with all of you, to lift our voices to the King of Kings, the creator of the universe, the one who came down to earth and saved us. He is worthy of our praise. Let's sing together. I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. Yeah. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name and and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new. Jesus, when I met you, you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Let's sing. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, but your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. With this heart open wide, from the depths, from the heights, I will bring a sacrifice. With these hands lifted high, hear my song, hear my cry. I will bring a sacrifice. I will bring a sacrifice. I lay me down, I'm not my own. I belong to you alone. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, and on my heart this much is true. There's no life I won't come through. Lay me down, lay me down. Letting go of my pride, giving up all my rights. Take this life and let it shine. Take me down. I lay me down, I'm not my own. I belong to you alone. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, hand on my heart, this much is true. There's no life apart from you. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, lay me down, lay me down. It will be my joy to say your will, your way. It would be my joy to say your will, your way. It would be my joy to say your will, your way. Let's sing it out. It will be my joy. It will be my joy to say your will, your way. It would be my joy to say your will, your way. It would be my joy to say your will, your way, Let's lift it up. I lay me down, I'm not my own. I belong to you alone. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, hand on my heart, this much is true. There's no life apart from you. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, lay me down, lay me down. Oh, lay me down, lay me down. Amen. And I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine all in all. Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Jesus died my soul to save. My lips shall still repeat, Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, sheet white as snow. He washed it white as snow. Yeah, he washed it white as snow. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from death. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up. Lift it up, church. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who up from the dead. He raised us up, raised us from the dead. We sing, Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Crimson stain. One more time, Jesus. We're going to sing a new chorus right now. And in thinking about this song, it's pretty simple. It just simply says, this is how I fight my battles. That it may look like I'm surrounded, but we're surrounded by God tonight. And in thinking about the God that is on our side, the God that is for us and not against us, I'm reminded that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and the powers of this world. So when we call on the Lord to fight our battles for us, that's exactly what he does. And our weapon is worship. When we sing, when we lift our voices, he meets us. Goes like this. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Lift it up. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I is how I find my, it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how we fight my battles. This is how we fight our battles. This is how we fight our battles. This is how we fight our battles. Yes, this is how we fight our battles. 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 It may look, let's sing it one more time. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. He's here. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Yeah. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Amen. And God, we just proclaim that tonight. That if we're in the midst of a struggle and a challenge, God, we just want to give you control right now. We want to surrender to you right now, God. That if we're in the midst of a battle, we don't want to fight it ourselves. We want to worship our way through it. God, help us just to worship our way through it. To sing your praises. Like Peter, to get our eyes off of the waves and onto you, God. Onto you, Jesus. May we feel your presence tonight, God. May we know that you're here. Come and speak to us. Surround us tonight. Oh, let's sing it one more time. It may look like I'm surrounded, but God, you're surrounding us. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Yes. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. And all God's people said, amen, amen, yes.
Amen. Why don't you grab a seat, please? So that song is awesome because it was awesome, and God's good, and he's faithful. And I've been up here for a while because last time I was here, I was sharing about our life was kind of crazy and trying to move and find a place to live. And we found a place to live, and it was full of mold, and the oven was leaking gas. Like, literally, our house was trying to kill us. Slowly with the mold, very quickly with the gas. And the whole time through all this, we were, my wife, Alicia, was pregnant. And so it felt in that moment like we were surrounded. But as we just sang, the reality is that God was surrounding us. And so I want to show you a picture. This is our son, Josiah. Thank you. Thank you so many who've reached out, responded on Facebook, sent us cards, gifts. We're so grateful. That was a Monday morning selfie, little Josiah Mark Higa. So he is adorable. And yeah, if you want to come and bounce him up and down at 1:30 in the morning, get him fall asleep, let me know, because I would appreciate that greatly. And so we can take him down because he's too distracting to look at for the rest of this time. But one of the things I've looked back on this whole summer, and it was crazy trying to find a place to live, finding a place to live, finding that's full of mold, finding that's full of gas, moving in with my mom, having Josiah while we were at my mom's, coming back home. And like, there's so much, like we felt like we were surrounded. But God was surrounding us. God was faithful because God is faithful, and he'll be faithful with whatever you are facing. And I love that God is faithful, even in our lack of faith, even when we're stumbling, even when we're not sure. God is always faithful. In our lives, we can look at them as just really a response back to God's faithfulness. If God is faithful to us, then how can we be faithful to him? How can we make choices that are honoring to him? That's faithfulness to God. How can we stand up for what's right? That's faithfulness, God. How can we speak truth to our families, raise our kids in a way that will honor God? How can we respond in faithfulness? And giving back to God, that's just one other way to respond faithfully to God in light of his great faithfulness. And so thank you to so many of you who give. We appreciate it. Thank you for being faithful as God is faithful. So I want to invite the ushers forward to receive our tithes and our offerings, then check out this video.
Oh, man, it is so good to see you guys. Welcome to Friday Night Church. If you guys have a Bible, of course. If you guys have a Bible, we're in John chapter 21 tonight. John chapter 21, that's page 1088 in the Blue House Bibles if you have that. Of course, we've got our notes on YouVersion, the Bible app that you can follow along with. And so while we're getting to John chapter 21, I got to come over here and show you guys this because this is a treat for you. This is a window, just in case you guys didn't know. This is a window right here. Ooh, we have one woo. Okay. This is a window. And clearly it's not being used the way it was designed to be used. It's not attached to a house or anything, but I think that, there was probably at one point a family or a person, whatever house it was in, that would use this window to look through and see their backyard, see the street, that this was a window that would bring in sunlight to a house, and it's not being used for that anymore. So I'm sure that most of us would probably come and look at this window and say, you know what? It's broken. It's not being used what it was designed for. It's kind of actually worthless, and there's nothing really to it. And so we look at this window and maybe not even give it a second thought, that there's no point of even looking at it because what are we supposed to look on the other side of it? It's just on a stage. And we might see it in this state and just say, failure. This window is a failure. But I wonder how many of us are this? That we would come in, and however we're coming in tonight, we'd say, man, I just feel broken. I feel tired. I feel alone. I feel like I can't get ahead, and I'm just not being used, and I'm not being utilized what I was designed for. There's just something in me that's lacking. And what's scary is if that's weighing us down, it's not just the fact that we feel overwhelmed. It's not the fact that we might feel helpless. I mean, that's scary enough in itself, but it's the pit that we feel like we're stuck in that we can't see a way to climb out. It's the fact that we think, oh man, I failed, I'm broken, and man, there's nothing beyond that. Like, that's what's going to define me. That's what's going to define who I am. And I know this exists with people in this room because I have conversations with you. I have conversations with your sons and with your daughters about unmet expectations, about failures, about the weight of sin that just exists in our life, that hardship that we have to face. And honestly, what some of you and your families are facing, that just the things that I know about, it is heart-wrenching. I'm sorry that you have to face some of the hardships that you're facing. My heart breaks for you. But I'm so glad you're here right now, because what if failure didn't have to be the end? What if that wasn't just the period on the end of our life? That it's not about the failure. And so we come to our final story in our Something More series. And we've been traveling through the Gospel of John all summer long. I hope you guys have enjoyed a lot of the stories. I hope you guys have enjoyed a ton of great messages. And so tonight, as we come into the final story of the Gospel of John, really what's happening is Jesus has been crucified, he's been buried, he's resurrected, and he's appeared to the disciples a few times. And most of the disciples are here in this moment, the story that we're going to look at. But I think the disciples are in this weird space that they don't really quite know what's happening. And when we read this story, what I want to just yell at the disciples is like, Jesus is alive. He's back. What are you doing? Get on with the work. What are you waiting for? And so the man that they've been following the past couple of years has died, and he's come back to life, and he's appearing to them at like random spots and kind of freaking them out a little bit. And then he's just saying, all right, I've just appeared out of the wall, and you know what? Have peace, right? It seems like it's probably a little hard to figure that part out. Like, just be at peace. But something isn't quite right for the disciples. Something's not connecting and not clicking, and they're probably thinking, what now? What am I supposed to do now? What's the next step? Where am I supposed to go? And so what they decide to do is fish, because fishing is what they know. Fishing is familiar. And so they jump on a boat and they go out and they just want to fish for the night. And I wonder how many of us are stuck where the disciples are. I wonder how many of us are just kind of in that weird space where we're engaging in aimless activity under the guise of for the Jesus mission. And we're calling it's for Jesus, but really, it might be good and it might feel good, but it's giving birth to nothing in our lives. It's giving birth to nothing in other people's lives. And so the disciples, they're out on the boat all night long and they catch nothing, no fish. See, I think without Jesus, failure continues to lead us to aimless activity. It continues to push us to places where it might be good activity, it might be fun activity, but it's just kind of aimless. We're just kind of wandering around. Some of us are really good at doing Christian things. Some of us are really good at serving, and we study, and we give, but we still feel stuck in our lives. Like we can't catch anything. We're not catching the fish that we think that we're supposed to be catching. But I love this story. Check this out. Starting in verse 4, this is what it says. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. Already, it's setting up for a really good one. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. Peter's all action, man. Like, I'm not going to think about it. I don't care where we're at. I'm just going to swim to the shore. This is the funny part, right? He jumped in the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, right? We got to park the boat at some point, right? And when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Now notice in this passage that Jesus' tone wasn't hopeful when he told them to throw the net on the other side. And that Jesus wasn't giving a suggestion. He was actually giving provision. Jesus wasn't just throwing out a suggestion. Maybe it might work if you throw it to the other side. No. I'm going to provide. I'm giving you provision. And I don't know if you've ever caught this. The disciples, most of them are fishermen by trade. Like, this is what they were raised to do. This is their job. But you ever notice in the Gospels that they never caught fish without Jesus? Right? Isn't that kind of crazy? What's that say about Jesus? He is the provider. Jesus is the provider. He is something more, and he gives us exactly what we need the moment we need it. See, without Jesus, failure can lead to aimless activity, but with Jesus, Jesus can turn failure fruitful. Jesus can turn failure in our lives to something that's fruitful. I mean, you got to remember, Jesus is the sovereign Lord. That when we choose to obey him, when we choose to engage in our relationship, not only does Jesus provide, but our labor is fruitful and not aimless activity. That's the difference in it. And so John, the writer of the gospel, recognizes it's Jesus first. Now, whether or not he really knew it was Jesus or it was just a really good guess, Peter hears, he jumps into the water, and he tries to get to Jesus quick while the rest of the disciples are bringing the boat to shore. And they're just, when they finally get to Jesus, what does Jesus have for them? He's got breakfast set over a charcoal fire. Now, that's actually a really significant thing, but put a pin in that because we're going to get to that in a moment. And the net was full of fish. It says 153 fish were in the net. I don't know how much the net could have held, but I'm assuming that the reason why they gave us that number, because one more it would have busted. And so the net didn't break, and what it reveals is the abundance that Jesus gives freely to us. And it's just the right amount. That this abundance that Jesus has, that there's no end to the tank. That there's nothing that he can't just continue to keep providing. Jesus is the provider. Breakfast was a quiet affair. No one was talking. No one was chatting it up. They weren't saying much. They definitely weren't saying, like, is this really Jesus? Because they know they probably would have gotten in trouble for that. So breakfast was quiet. But I wonder if in the silence that the disciples were thinking about some experiences they had with Jesus. I wonder if because of how abundantly full the net was, if they thought all the way back to Jesus' first miracle at the wedding at Cana, where Jesus didn't just turn one bottle of water into wine. He took 12 huge basins full of water and turned it into wine. I wonder if they thought about the time where Jesus fed the 5,000. Really, that was just the 5,000 men. There was probably 15 to 20,000 people with a little kid's lunch. I wonder if they thought about the abundance in that moment and how even after, with 3 loaves and 2 fish, that they had 12 baskets full of extra food. But I wonder if it was maybe a little more subtle than that. I wonder if they thought about the fact that when Jesus was originally calling them out and saying, look, I want you to do ministry with me. I want you to live with me. That they were reminded of what Jesus said to them, which is, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. And so when the breakfast was finished, Jesus and Peter have this conversation kind of off to the side. They kind of get out of the way a little bit. And this is what it says, starting in verse 15. It says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. See, that we know of, the last time Peter was next to a charcoal fire, he denied Christ 3 times. And so I would assume, that this is probably an uncomfortable moment. Can you put yourself in Peter's shoes for just a moment? And how Jesus is asking him these questions and maybe the shame that Peter's feeling, the awkwardness of the moment. This is the guy that he denied not too long ago. And so it says that he was hurt by Jesus' process of questions, his questions and the process that Jesus was going. And probably hurt because Peter felt like an epic failure. He probably felt like an epic failure. I mean, I'm sure that we could all relate to what Peter's feeling in this moment. I would assume that most of us in this room would be willing to say, yeah, I have failed. Some of us would probably say, yeah, I had an epic failure. Some of us probably failed on the way to church tonight. At some point in the last week, I'm sure some of us would say, yeah, I failed in this moment. And you know what happens when we fail? We begin to shut down. When we have to face failure over failure over failure, then we begin to shut down. And actually, there are physiological implications when we have to face failure in our lives. There are physiological implications. Psychology Today article that I came across said that among other things, when we face failure, here's some of the stuff that we have to deal with. That when we fail, all of a sudden, it makes our goals that we have in our life seem less attainable. Right? So we fail, and then all of a sudden it's like, man, I can't do that. That's just too lofty of a goal. I can't reach that. That when we fail, it distorts our perception of what we're capable of. So I failed, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not that talented. When we fail, we feel helpless. When we fail, we create this unconscious fear of failure. Meaning like, I don't want to even go into that area as it relates to failure in my life. Like, I want to stay away from those kinds of feelings and that kind of hurt that comes with failure. And then we begin to make decisions based on not wanting to experience failure in our lives. So we become very safe. We don't want to risk anything because we don't hate the feeling of failure. We begin to sabotage ourselves. I'm not even going to try it. Because you know what? I know I'm not good enough to do it. And so we stay away from it. We create a culture of a fear of failure in our networks. Parents, if you are afraid of failure, you will pass that fear of failure on to your kids. If you hang out with people enough, you might pass that on to some friends, into your job, into your network. When we face failure, the pressure to succeed begins to mount, right? Like failure after failure. Oh man, at some point I have to succeed or else it's not going to go well. And when we put like a pressure to succeed on ourselves, that's when we choke in the big moment. You ever have that basketball game or that football game where you're like, all right, our person's going to make this and they're like, we're going to go wild, and then they shank whatever it is? Oh my gosh, the pressure to succeed, and they choke in the big moment. And that's just some of the physiological stuff that actually happens when we face failure in our lives. And it's also the same thing, kind of like what sin does to us when we continue to go into it. And we're like, you know what? Well, I've done it once. I might as well just do it again. I might as well just give into it again. It's all I can do. This is as best as I can be. And so when we face like bankruptcy in our lives, when we have failed relationship after failed relationship, when we don't pass that class that we thought we were going to pass, when we have to face a failure in loss, whether it's death or estrangement, like that stuff takes a toll. That stuff takes a toll on us mentally, physically, spiritually. And when we're in the midst of all that stuff, then we start to say things like, man, there's no way out of this pit. I cannot climb myself. I can't even see daylight up there. This is so hard. It's so difficult. And we give in to that and it becomes this vicious cycle in our lives. And in this conversation, what you need to understand, what you need to know is that Jesus is not punishing Peter. 3 denials, you better confess 3 times. That's not what Jesus is doing. Jesus knows that unless Peter deals with this failure, unless Peter deals with this sin, Peter will not be able to fully step into his calling from God. He has to deal with it. He has to get it right. It's like you can't fully appreciate the taste of food until you've starved. You can't fully appreciate what it's like to be healthy until you've dealt with sickness. And Peter, I would say, loved Jesus before the crucifixion. I don't have any problem saying that. I think Peter absolutely loved Jesus, but I would guess that Peter's pride had stopped him from completely owning the Jesus mission and understanding grace and humility and love and forgiveness. And when Jesus begins this conversation with Peter, he's using his birth name. Did you notice that? He's not calling him Peter. He's saying Simon John. He's not calling him his very own nickname. That probably cut to Peter's soul just a little bit right there too. And Jesus asked Peter, do you love me more than these? What are these? He was actually talking about the other disciples. He's saying, Peter, do you love me more than the other disciples love me? Are you the greatest when it comes to loving me? Why? Why would he ask that? Because when you read the Gospels over and over again, isn't it Peter who's saying, and isn't it Peter's pride and his arrogance and him boasting about, Jesus, you know I love you. I'm with you to the very end. I'm your right-hand man. I'm not going to leave you. If you're going to die, I'm going to die with you. And what'd Peter do? He took off. Not only did he take off like all the other disciples, he actually denied he even knew Jesus. And so do you notice Peter's response when he says, do you love me more than these? Peter just says, you know I love you. You know I love you. You know all things, Lord. I love you. Peter's not claiming to love Jesus more than the others. There's no boast. There's no claim to be the greatest. Peter has been changed by his failure. Peter has been changed by his failure, and he keeps his focus on what's important. I don't know how much the other guys love you, but Jesus, all I know is that I love you. I love you. 3 denials, 3 confessions. Like a scalpel making a precise cut to cut out the failure that would hold him back. Peter had to deal with it. Jesus and Peter had to wrestle with this in this moment. And Jesus responds each time. His first time he says, feed my lambs. Then he says, take care of my sheep. And then the last one he says, feed my sheep. Why? Jesus is the good shepherd. That's one of his titles. Jesus is the good shepherd. And now he's commissioning Peter. To care for the flock. This new community that Jesus has set up. And Peter's being released out into the world under the authority of Jesus. Peter's relationship with Jesus is now characterized by humility, characterized by dependence upon Jesus, and obedience. This is the difference between true discipleship and aimless activity. It's this conversation right here. That Jesus is the key to changing that for us. We got to deal with some of our stuff. It can't just be the aimless activity. We can't just serve and assume that we're doing it under the mission of Jesus. Peter comes under Jesus. And what it tells us is that failure is not final. We got to stop right there for just a moment. I feel like some of us probably don't get to hear this very often. Some of us probably don't believe that this is true. No, listen, your failure is not final. It's the difference between discipleship and aimless activity. It's the difference between being broken and being reclaimed. Failure is not final. See, with Jesus, epic failure leads to epic reclamation. Epic failure leads to epic reclamation. It's deeper than just, I forgive you, we're going to forget about it, and now you can go on your way. It's deeper than that. See, when we deal with the failure in our lives, when we deal with the sin that exists in our lives, what's happening is transformation. That's the goal. That's what we want. We want to look more like Jesus at the end of this day. And so that's what's happening, the real transformation. And then when we have real transformation, Jesus elevates us to a greater purpose than before. He elevates us to something different. I don't know that Peter would have been able to do the things that he did in Acts and on if he didn't have this one conversation with Jesus. And Jesus, so he deals with it, and Jesus says, I'm going to elevate your purpose. Man, and you're going to set the world on fire for my mission. And it would be cool if the story just ended right there, but of course not. Like, it doesn't end there. It keeps going. In verse 18, Jesus continues, says, very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hand and someone else will dress you and lead you where you don't want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, Lord, who is going to betray you? And when Peter saw him, he asked, Lord, what about him? Jesus answered, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. Because of this, a rumor spread among the believers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You ever read some of the stuff Jesus says and you're like, that's weird. Like, what does that even mean? This is bizarre. what Jesus is doing, he's telling Peter, like, hey, listen, if you love me, if you really love me, if you're going to tend to my sheep, if you're going to care for my flock, it comes at a cost. There's a price to be paid for it. And Jesus uses this picture of Peter's life and of his youth and his life up to this moment, and then what's going to happen after this conversation. And basically, the contrast he's doing is Peter's self-will, and now the fact that Peter's laying that down, he's coming under the authority of someone else. He's coming under the authority of Jesus. He's reclaiming your failure. Reclaiming your failure. If you're going to allow Jesus to reclaim your failure, that means you have to give Jesus claim over your life. You don't get to say, fix it, and then run away and do the things that you want because you want to do them. If you're saying, Jesus, I want you to reclaim my failure, turn it into something greater, then Jesus now has claim over our life. And Jesus is saying, I've reclaimed what's broken. And that means you will be led into territory that you probably don't want to go to. It means you're going to be led to places that are going to be uncomfortable and awkward, including the fact that you're going to die for this cause. You're going to die for my mission. And historically, the church has said that Peter's been crucified. Peter, right before he got crucified, he said that he didn't want to be, he didn't feel adequate enough to be crucified in the same manner as his Lord and Savior. And so they turned the cross upside down, and he was crucified upside down. That's historically what the church has said. Either way, no matter how he actually died, his death brought glory to God. And that's what Jesus was telling him. Look, man, if you sell out for my mission, your death will bring glory to the Father. And also in this conversation, it seems like there's a little bit of competition between Peter and John, the one Jesus loved. And it's actually quite the opposite. They were actually really good friends. And even though Peter's asking about, well, what's going to happen to him, it wasn't because he was wondering if John was going to be better than him. They both had special new roles in this community that Jesus had set up. He was actually asking out of, care. I wonder what's going to happen to him because I love my brother. I want to know. And what Jesus says, what I have in store for John is not your concern. How many of us waste so much time and energy and effort wondering what other people are doing? Wondering if the other people that are serving for Jesus are really serving for Jesus? How much time and energy and effort do we waste on things that don't matter when we should be focused on just serving and glorifying our Savior? The other stuff's going to figure itself out. So Jesus says, what I have in store for John is not your concern or business, not even the timeline. Don't even worry about it. And what we need to know is that when Jesus reclaims our lives, it is not for free. It's not a transaction of I'm going to purchase these goods and I'm going to go do whatever I want with what I bought. No, Jesus reclaims our lives, and it means that we are surrendering to him. That's discipleship. That's what it means to follow Jesus. And guess what? We're going to have to be put in places and situations and awkward moments and uncomfortable situations. It's just going to be weird that we're not going to want any part of. But that's part of following Jesus. But when we're there, when we're in that moment, we're to live it out as best as possible for the glory of God. That's our role. That's our responsibility. Jesus is calling you. Are you willing to respond? Are you willing to respond? See, to you, it's just a window. It's just a window that's not attached to any house. It's nothing to look at. But to me, it's something more. To me, it's not just that. It's something greater. See, Allison and I bought this window, I think right before we got married. And so it's been hung up on the wall of every place that we've lived in. So when we finally moved into our first home, we wanted to set up our downstairs area because that's the place where everyone's going to be. And we'll figure out the other stuff later. But if the downstairs area is comfortable for people, then great, we've done our job. But to me, it didn't feel like home until this got on the wall. And when we put it on the wall, I think we got a picture for you. And the reason why it feels comfortable is because it's right above my spot on the couch. It's home. It feels comfortable. And so tonight at some point, I'm going to go lay down on the couch right in that little corner. Because it feels good. So when I see this, It's not just a broken, useless window. It's something more. It's something different. Before it might have been even up on a wall in a house, people probably wouldn't even have paid attention. It's just something that they had to look through to see what's going on outside. They probably didn't stop and notice some of the things. Like I know that there's messed up pieces on it. I know that where the paint is peeling. I know where the glass isn't exactly perfect, and it's been reclaimed for something greater. It's not just something that people use to look out through. Like I look at it and go, man, this is art in my house. There's a purpose behind it. We've taken it, we've elevated its purpose. It's something different, something greater. So I get excited when I see this window. You may not get excited about it, but I get excited. And I wonder that when God sees you, and he sees the failures in your life, and he sees the sin in your life, I wonder how many of us go, well, that's the end of it. That's what God sees. But yet when we go back to this story where Peter has denied Jesus 3 times, and then Jesus comes back for him and says, no, I know that brokenness exists. I know that failure exists, but I want to deal with it because I want to reclaim your life and give you a greater purpose. I want to breathe better life into you, and I want your purpose to be sung throughout the world. I have reclaimed your heart. You're no longer broken, but you're set apart for something greater. Failure is not the end. Failure is the beginning. We have been commissioned for more. So the question that you have to answer tonight is, do you love Jesus? Then take care of his sheep. Do you love Jesus? Then do something about it. Imagine for just a second how this could change our community. Imagine just for a second if all of a sudden we just took this one conversation between Jesus and Peter seriously and to heart. How would that change us? That if we stopped for a minute and said, no, Jesus has called me out for a greater purpose. He's called me out by name. That if we lived like Jesus, reclaimed our lives, how would that change the way we see people, our relationships with others? How would that change the way we see ourselves? How would that change our relationship with God? What could happen when all of a sudden we walk out of here and we lived like reclaimed lives, elevated to a greater purpose? It could happen through something like Lifeline. It could happen through small group, Rooted. Maybe you need someone to come alongside you and mentor you. Maybe you just need a chance to talk to a couple of people. Maybe you need to serve in a ministry. Maybe it's time to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And I want you to understand, it's not about the program. It's not about the activity itself. It's what makes it something more is Jesus. When we focus on Jesus and we jump into something like Rooted or we jump into something like small group, that's what changes the game for us. Jesus is that something more. That when we experience, I've totally enjoyed the Something More series. Hopefully you guys have as well. And I don't know about you, but story after story in the Gospel of John, that as we move closer to Jesus, as we experience the something more he offers, he creates something more in us. A desire for a deeper discipleship. Maybe a tangible experience of heaven here on this side of it. Maybe an overwhelming sense of God's love for the first time in your life. A desire to serve others, maybe to be generous in a new way. I have one last verse I want to read. It's the very last verse of this book. Verse 25 says, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that could be written. People, Jesus is the something more that we need. Nothing else. Jesus is the something more that we need. At this moment, I just want to invite you to stand, and we're going to close this moment, this series with a word of prayer. So if you're able, I'd invite you to stand. Jesus. It is so fun to dive into your story. All the funny things that you say, all the cool miracles, all the interesting conversations you have with people. Ultimately, Lord, that fails in comparison when we stop and realize that you did it all to save us. You did it all to bridge the gap between us and God. You did it so that our failures wouldn't have to be final. I'm so thankful for this moment that you had with Peter. It lets me know that I don't have to give in to the brokenness. I don't have to settle for less than what I was designed for, the less that we were designed for. Your love is so overwhelming. I am thankful that my failure doesn't have to be what defines me. But the fact that you went to the cross for me, for us, that you defeated death and resurrected. No other story is as great as that. Thank you. Thank you for being something more, Jesus. Amen.
Are you hurting and broken within? Overwhelmed by the weight of your sin? Jesus is calling. Have you come to the end of yourself? Do you thirst for a drink from the well? Jesus is calling. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Yeah. Leave behind your regrets and mistakes. Come today, there's no reason to wait. Jesus is calling. Oh, bring your sorrows and trade them for joy. From the ashes, a new life is born. Jesus is calling. Oh, come. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Oh, let's sing it to Jesus. Oh, what a Savior. Isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah. Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah. Christ is risen.
The Father's arms are open wide. We're so glad that you guys are here tonight. If you need prayer or someone to talk to, I'll be down here by the stairs after the service. I'd love to see you. And we have a tradition here at CBC, benediction, good word, blessing. And so if you'd like to receive it, you just put your hands out like this. And the good word for tonight comes from Micah chapter 7, verse 8. And this is what it says. Do not gloat over me, my enemies. For though I fall, I will rise again. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. So because of Jesus, your failure is not final. Live that way as you go out and be the church. We'll see you guys next week. Don't forget your free root beer float.